The video you're about to see is Andy Stefanovich. He was our keynote in Visions this February in Richmond, and he is known as one of the most effective advisors in business. He wrote a best-selling book, is involved in TED Talks, and is a leadership coach for companies such as Disney, GE, and Gap. So with that, we'll now turn it over to the video.
So, hi, how are you guys?
Good.
It's what morning, what is it? It's a cloudy Thursday morning in Richmond, Virginia, somewhere in Innsbruck in the West End. We're just gonna have a conversation. And what I wanna do is the next 30, 45 minutes is just have a conversation with you about these ideas that are simply about thinking about how to think about things. And it's not about business exclusively. It's not about accounting, and it's not about IT, and it's not technology, and it's not transformation. And I probably won't use any of those words, because those words are the words you guys know really well. Like, you're experts. You're really good at that. My job working with executives around the world is to not use those words. It's to use children's books, and use museums, and use artists, and use culture, and anthropology, and ethnography, and psychology, and atlases and maps, and driving down the road in the middle of Iowa and just looking at things and talking about them and thinking about them harder, because when you inspire really smart people, they will take that inspiration and they use that as creative, and they will form that into a creative thought, and then they will move that into an innovation. So it's the whole idea of just simply looking at more stuff and thinking about it harder. Dave alluded to it, but there are 5 kind of ways of thinking about this. And my book is, I reference my book, I'm not really an author. The book kind of wrote itself, my team kind of wrote it, so whenever someone says, you're an author, I always kind of like get wobbly knees, like, I'm not an author, I'm not that guy who goes to Barnes & Noble and signs books, that sounds like an author. I'm a guy who ran a business for a long time and worked really hard like you guys do every day, and a group of people wrote this book with me. We wrote the stories and we gave it to a publisher, and we were fortunate enough to then put it on Barnes & Noble's shelves, so it did become a book. But the book was very simple, and it was when Microsoft, actually, when I was doing with Microsoft, how ironic is that? Microsoft and Xbox, remember their little gaming division? They asked me to come out and help them integrate those businesses, because there was the guys in the ties and the guys doing Microsoft, and then there were the guys with the tats and the piercings doing the Xbox stuff. And they said, we've got to have more integration and more seamlessness between those. There's too much friction, and there's not enough congruence and not enough alignment around them. Are you good? Are you in an odd spot? Because you're like, right, what if I stood right here and made it even more comfortable for you? So I flew out there like 5 times, and on my last trip out, unsuccessfully, we did not figure out how to integrate them. We decided not to integrate them and let them stand alone. But on the flight back, Jeff Stone, my designer at that point, industrial designer, design thinker, kind of one of those guys who designs everything, we were sitting in like 38B on our own time at that point, and I had a dry erase marker in my briefcase like I always do, like you guys probably write on things and then think about things in the shower. Have one in the shower. My wife freaks out with the red dry erase in the shower on the big glass. It's fun when she gets in. She's like, what? Why here? Not in the shower? I'm not ready for your work? But it was on 38B, I grabbed the dry erase and said, Jeff, there's just got to be a better way to make people think about how to think about the organization and how to get them to kind of condition themselves in the right ways to think about how to change and grow. Because that's what it's always about, change and growth. The only 2 words I kind of know and love are change and growth, because that's what we do as people, organizations, in the world, right? And so we want for our kids, we want for our companies, our teams, our people, our teams, our families, our companies, the world's industry, like the ethos, right? So change and growth, but it's really 5 things. The first one is that one won't work. Here, I'll do it here. So the first one is mood. The second one is mindset. Third one is mechanisms. And when we were writing this on the 38B window, we did not have this one in there, but I'll fill you in a minute, and we had momentum. So we said these are the 4 things that if you were to think about how to think about these things inside of a company, you'll find growth. So the first one is, it's all about the mood. So when you walk in a place like this, or you walk into your office, or you walk into your home, you walk in a restaurant, or a bar, or a grocery store, what's the mood? How do you feel? What's the ethos? What's the culture? What's the kind of the energy? Is it a good energy you want to stay? Is it bad energy you want to turn around and walk out as fast as possible? That's all it is. And it's your job as a leader to create the mood in order to create the place that people want to hang out and do good work and spend time and create and change the world, right? So it's the mood. It's like cult. It's like this culture. It's like the weather. It kind of comes and goes. It's like, and you can make the mood as a leader. And you can kind of create the mood by virtue of hand on the back and saying great job, or let's buy lunch for everybody, or just saying great job, or looking someone in the eye. All of that matters way, 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 way more than you think. Like, it is the single most intangible thing that is the difference between a company and a person killing it and being very average. The single biggest thing. The second one is mindset. And the mindset is really, cultural is mood, mindset is individual. And there are four things that kind of make up the mindset. The first one is confusion tolerance. How high of a confusion tolerance do you have? Are you only in the black and white, or do you have a space for the gray? Are you allowing yourself to think about ideas and thoughts and not just solutions? Do you suspend the need to jump to solutions to kind of think about thoughts, which might lead to some ideas, which might lead to some solutions? How high are you in the confusion tolerance? I am extremely high. My wife, born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Midwestern, economics, an analyst major at my university, where we both went, the lowest of confusion tolerance ever. Why we're together and why we've had 35 years together is because of that, right? We are completely on the spectrum of high and low, and that's why we meet in the middle. Confusion tolerance is one on mindset. Number two is passion. And I'm going to talk more about passion in a minute, because passion is one of those intangibles that is the tangible, that is the difference. It truly is. The other one is change perspective. How well are you at seeing the world and looking at the world through different lenses, kids' books and otherwise? My wife owns a kids' bookstore in Carytown. Anyone ever been to BBGB? Right next to World of Mirth? You're nodding your head, Tammy. Really? You've been to BBGB? Buy books at your local bookstore. Do not use Amazon. Why can't you go to Whole Foods because they bought Amazon, or whatever, vice versa? Buy local bookstore books from little people, because that's where the books come from, and children's literacy is important. I'm very passionate about it. But the idea of change perspective, seeing the world through lenses alternative to the world in which you look. Because when you put an intellectual property in person like you through with a lens of a kid's book or otherwise, you will use that inspiration, contextualize it, and move it into a source of creativity and innovation. Change perspective, passion, and then what's the other one? Confusion tolerance. The last one is risk. And I'm going to talk about risk in a minute, because risk isn't really the way you see it. It's not even close to the way you see it. Risk is just not the way you see it, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute. So those are the four indexes under mindset. And then you've got this thing called mechanisms, the things that you guys know and build and create every day. They're the tools, the technologies, the levers, the analogs, the stories. They're the ways, the on-ramps, the mechanisms are the things that are the tools and techniques that help drive growth and change. And then we jumped right to momentum to say, well, if we have mood and mindset and mechanisms, it's all about the momentum. We want to make sure that this thing called growth and change isn't just in a season or in a couple days or in a conference or in a creative session or during a campaign or integration of two companies. It's got to have systemic and kind of choreographed momentum. It has to be long term. And then we came back and said, no, contraire. We added to the window this other one called measurement. And measurement is what you measure, you get done, right? It's just philosophy. It's just the way the world works and the way we think as people who want to progress and do good things. So you've got mood, mindset, mechanisms, measurement, and momentum. So process those words for a second and think about how good you are at creating the mood, where you stand and where your team stands in terms of a mindset, confusion tolerance, staying in the gray, taking risks, or whatever I'm going to give to you in terms of an IP around risk. The idea of change perspective, how you use the world to use that as a source of inspiration to put on top of your intellectual world to see the world differently. And then passion, which I'm going to tell you about in a minute. And think about how you and how the teams you're working with line up around those things. And when you find someone that has passion galore, and you're a little bit depleted from whether it's a sickness or just pneumonia or just personality or the season in which you're living, you find somebody like Courtney, who's my creative partner, best friend, who I worked with for 25 years. Undeniably, every single day I wake up, here's Courtney. When you get on a conference call, which we work virtually as a group of about 5 of us, when you get on a conference call, you always want to be first, because Courtney's always 5 minutes in advance of that conference call, and she's singing Welcome to the Conference Call song. And it's a song she makes up every day with different lyrics, and she sings it, and she just brings that energy to the conference call. And she's crazy, idiot, amateur hour, rookie, sophomore, any of those words you want to say, but what she really is none of those words. What she really is that person that has passion for helping people see the world. And you need to align yourself with those people if, in fact, you need a little bit of that energy. So if you're not these things, where do you get these things? And who do you imply expertise off of and lean on to get those things? And then there's the mechanisms, the tools, the techniques, and levers, which you guys are so proficient at and so good at, I don't need to go any further. Then there's the measures, and I'm going to tell you about how to think about the measures, because it's really not about the measures, it's about what you don't measure and what you should be measuring, not the things you're measuring. What you're measuring now are really kind of pedantic and kind of incrementalizing your business along. If you were to reframe that, it might just change the trajectory in every aspect, whether you're leading, whether you're doing, or whether you're managing. All the things you measure right now are fundamentally probably wrong and kind of displaced if you want to be thinking about transformative work as opposed to incrementalizing things along. And then there's this idea of momentum, making sure that it's not some seasonal thing or an event, but making sure it's long-term. So process those words for 2 seconds, and I want to ask you this question. What's the provocative question? The question you guys would write down in your journal, in your head, or in your phone right now, and I want you to do that for 10 seconds. What's the provocative question we should probably be asking ourselves if we're a group of people thinking about growth and change and looking at more and transformation and technology and business and accounting and transformation, all these things you're thinking about, what's the question we should be asking that's really kind of scary and a little bit takes your breath away if we really want to get at these topics in the right way? Just ask yourself that. Not so much as a business person, just as someone who's got really great common sense and really smart. What's the question we should be asking if, in fact, we want to get at those things we just talked about? Growth, change, transformation, integration, all the things we do as business people. What's the question you'd ask if we wanted to kind of stop the madness, stop the presses, walk in the room and say, we've been looking at it this way, but think if we ask this question, we may fundamentally see it differently. Who's got a question? Jeff, I'm going to call on you.
Yeah, thanks.
What question would you ask?
Where do you want to be?
Where do you want to be? Like, give us a preferred future. Give us a vision and a visual of what you're trying to get to, because without that, you won't get there. And I call it the preferred future. Not the future that happens to you, but the preferred future, the one you've kind of visualized and can see so clearly, and you kind of tell stories in order for people to get there. What's another question you'd ask? Patrick. Anybody else? What do you got?
Debbie stepped in.
Debbie.
What is a harmonious outcome I would like to have?
What's the harmonious outcome I want to have? Harmonious outcome, tell me more about that. Why do you want harmonious in there as an adjective?
Because I'm like that. I want harmony.
Yeah.
I don't like discord. I don't like, stressful situations. And so that's a saying of ours at home, a harmonious outcome.
I'm stealing that and taking it home to my daughters because we did not have harmony last night at home. We had a bad lacrosse tryout and a lot of homework and a lot of we had kava for dinner, which wasn't very good, but it normally is, and it was just a mess. Dogs, puppies all over, and it was messy. Harmony is what we're looking for. I'll give you another term that you want to steal. It's called elegant solution. You guys know what an elegant solution is? Jeff, elegant solution is by definition from you what? Elegant solution.
An elegant solution is something that's easy to use, that solves difficult problems, but you don't even know that you're solving a difficult problem.
That's so perfectly said. You don't even know you're solving that problem. An elegant solution, by definition, another way is it's a solution that solves multiple benefits. It made the puppies happy, made the kava taste better, had the lacrosse practice that went a bump feel a little bit okay, and it's just part of life. The homework is not as big as it really seems to be at this little school they go to that loads them up, and I get crazed about it every night. Like, they're in 8th grade. Why 12 hours of homework every day? An elegant solution would have been me walking in with a bunch of balloons and having everybody come downstairs and sit down and look at each other and have an angel food cake and just take life not so seriously. We needed that last night. It would have rippled across all those issue sets we were trying to get at, right? An elegant solution. What other question would we ask ourselves? Ricky?
A question that I would say that as an organization I find myself asking sometimes is what are we trying to accomplish?
What are we trying to
What
accomplish?
are we trying to accomplish? We just get, we get caught up in, we're implementing a system, but we never, sometimes we get confusion and all of that here. So what are we actually trying to do?
What are you trying to do with this? And then you ask it again. No, really, what are you really trying to do? Yeah, all that. Yeah, really, what are you trying to accomplish? The biggest and most successful CEOs in the world, I have really earned a decent living on almost saying that to them over and over and over. And they're like, oh my God, it's so profound. No, not really. All I'm doing is asking you what you're really trying to accomplish and why you're trying to accomplish it and who you're going to help get this done with. I just asked those questions, and it's the ones that are the profound ones. In this technological, fast-paced world, we need to stop the madness and think about the simple, kind of elegant ways of accessing ways to think about these topics. And they're not really the business conversations you're normally having. They're human conversations. They're personal conversations. They're intimate conversations. They're a little bit kind of awkward because they don't feel in the context of a room like this. They feel like you want to be having one on the park bench with your lover, right? It's a very different thing. What other question might we be asking? In order just to be having a more frankful conversation about all the stuff we're talking about, yeah.
How can we inspire our team?
How can we inspire our team? Because a leader does nothing more than create stories, tell those stories again. All of that is inspiration. Because they'll bring in the context of a good story, which is the way we learn. You're having them you're finding those stories and creating them. You're telling them, and then you're the broken record who tells them over and over and over, and that is the single greatest source of inspiration. That's all I did in building my business. That's all I did. I really did nothing. I did not do, I beed. I was just Andy walking around, floating around, telling stories, inspiring people, getting the balloons, bringing them the angel food cake, having someone's car washed because they had a terrible day. That's the stuff I did. I did no work. Because leaders and people like you in this room have work to do, but we also have to be that person. And that person to inspire ourselves and the people we're working with is the single greatest intangible, which is the tangible. So these questions are really important. Let me kind of tell you some stories for the next 30 minutes around some of these. And they're not going to be in this order, they're going to be random. And as I read these stories and tell you these stories, I want you to say, so Andy said, so what that might mean to me. That's all I want you to do. And as a result of the 9:30 walkout, I want you guys to say 2 to 3 things resonated with me around how to thinking about innovation, growth, transformation, technology, IT integration, etc. But it really wasn't even those words that I'm thinking about now. I'm thinking about them through the lens of, let me tell you about my wedding day. On April 16th, 1993, Jill and I are in Cedarburg, Wisconsin. Anyone ever been to Cedarburg, Wisconsin? It's where Palin and McCain went after they announced their candidacy, the single most conservative destination in the world of 8,000 people. It's crazy. And I'm not that, so Jill and I have a lot of that, right? Clash on that side. I'm over here, she's over here. We're elegant, but we're fighting it out every day. And so we're getting married, and the room has, at the top of the little Catholic church on the top of Main Street, two-strop-like town, has all the Serbians on this side, all my family, 50 of them, and on this side it's 100 Italians, the Lamacchia family from Kenosha and Cedarburg and all those little places in Wisconsin where all the Italians hang out. And all my Serbian family from Indianapolis came up from up the road, and there we were. And it's 11:58, and it's 9 months of planning, and the wedding planner had everything perfect, and everything was kind of perfect, right? Moms were sitting here, dads were, my dad's seated, the bridesmaids are over here, the grooms are right here. I'm standing right behind Dan Mueller, who's my best man, and I'm like, Dan, we gotta get on with this. He said, yeah, this is it. It's 11:59. Ave Maria is being played on the balcony by Jill's friend from high school, not very well, because it was free. So all of that's going on. 11:59 and a half, Jill's mother is seated, and it's all going down, and I see the wisp of Jill's dress back there behind the little vestibule, and just as I'm about to step out into the front where it's all going to go down at 12 o'clock, high noon, my Uncle Mitch stands up from about right where you are, Ricky, right in the middle, right in the front. He's an uncle, and he's a first-generation Serbian immigrant who worked at this place called Eli Lilly, the pharmaceutical company in Indianapolis, for 40 years on the line. Blue-collar, non-educated, first-generation immigrant in his polyester suit and his tie up to here and an unlit cigar in his mouth. He stands up in front of the group and he says, "Hi everybody, I'm Uncle Mitch." And I swear to you this happened. He got up from right there and walked around. He said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, I'm Uncle Mitch, everybody. And I'm sitting here watching this all go down. And I'm sure the wedding planner, where are you, Mary? I met you last night. You're a sweetie. I love you." But you know, I'm sitting there and I've known Andy for 38 years. He's one of my favorite nephews. And the way that this is happening, it just doesn't feel like the way that Andy and Jill would want to commence into their lives as a married couple. And so what I recommend is that you guys are going to be family with us in about 15 minutes based on this whole Catholic wedding. Are you good? Okay. And you're going to be our family, and you're going to be our family, and what I think you ought to do is I think you ought to get up and get to know each other. Because this whole, like, ceremony thing is in the way of us being a family. And they did. For 15 minutes, these guys got up, and these guys got up, and you, the aunt, and you, the aunt, had the same dress on, which was a little bit awkward out there, right? But then what happened after 15 minutes when we all sat down and you had hugged and kissed? You guys sat together and you're giving high fives, like, look at Aunt Mary and Aunt Jane from two different families, now we're family because they're wearing the same dress and sitting together and having fun with it, as opposed to feeling awkward about it, right? And it wasn't the kind of first generation immigrant, kind of middle class Stefanoviches kind of talking to the kind of cachet, important, almighty Italians. It was all of us together, and it wasn't the, I wish Jill would have married a middle-class Serbian versus a lower to middle-class Serbian. And it wasn't any of that tension anymore, because what happened after 15 minutes? Tell me.
Your family.
We got married, but what else? What was different? How was the room? The mood was different. Because a leader, Uncle Mitch, non-educated, first-generation Serbian immigrant who worked on a line at Eli Lilly for 40 years before he passed away, said, I'm not going to accept this mood that I just walked into. I'm going to change the mood to make the mood better. I'm going to make the mood that needs to be. And he did, and it changed everything. And Jill and I, to this day, give little clinks to Uncle Mitch and say why we've been together forever and why we have better than an average marriage is because we started off right. Because he did this. He purposely disrupted the moment to make the moment it needed to be. He purposely disrupted the moment to make the moment it needed to be. And how many meetings and how many events and how many things do you walk into and it just isn't the way that it needs to be, and you say to yourself, it could be better, I should do something, and you walk up and you say, I didn't. And it's a conversation with a colleague when you're doing some technology transformation, or it's a person you're meeting with for lunch to kind of talk about a hire or fire, or it's a family member, or it's a business associate, or whoever it is. How many times you say, I should have made the moment a little bit better to make the moment it noted to be, and I didn't. And because I didn't, we didn't get the outcomes we wanted. Shame on you. And shame on me for doing that. And it doesn't have to be like Uncle Mitch. Hey, everybody! It can be like Jill, my wife, who would have been, excuse me, I'm Jill, I'm a little bit reserved, I'm from Milwaukee. But I think it would be really cool if we were to get to know each other a little bit more. Jill would say it like that. Uncle Mitch was like, get up and get everybody a hug. It was just blatantly awkward and over the top. Because he's that guy, right? It's your way, your personality that's the way that's the difference into that idea. Then there's the idea of that. And I'm just going to toss a couple other little reference points at you. So there's this artist in town who has made art for a long time, but he decided that he really needed to get back to the art because he was teaching and he was doing some other stuff and he was kind of not really getting at the art. You know how you really don't do the things you love because the work gets in the way? He wasn't making art. So he said to himself in a kind of weak moment, I'm going to make a skull every day for 365 days. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm just going to start making skulls. And so one skull, and then the next skull, and then his first day was like he made it out of snow and made a snowman skull. And then the second day he kind of fried a grilled cheese and he kind of had the shape of a skull in it. Then the next day he actually kind of put on himself a tattoo of a skull. Then the next day he took the bed sheet in the hotel he was in and he shaped it in a skull and take a picture of it. Then the next day he took rubber bands and he put them on nails on a board and made the shape of a skull. And that's 5. But he then did it, then he had to do another, and then 60, and then 180, and then 220, and then 320, and then 365. That's a lot of skulls. Waking up every day and saying, I'm going to do it for a year. And I was sitting down with him, and I said, so how did you do this? How did you do it? And he said, I don't know. And I said, no. How did you do it? He said, I don't know. I just did it. I said, no. How did you do it? What did you do to get this done? And he's like, just pressing him. And he said, well, I don't know. I just knew I needed to make a skull, and I needed to do it every day, and I needed it to be different. And so I wrote down those 3 walls, and I said, a skull, daily, and different. So by having that creative friction, you got to create 365 amazing pieces of art that changed the world, that got him on Martha Stewart, the TV show, that 3 books were published as a result of it, that Jill and I have a piece of his art in his house, and he had 365 pieces of art that he could sell at galleries. He did a show in New York and 2 in LA. All of this is a result of being that focused around having those constraints to create. as you think about the mechanisms and the ways in which you create, think about the ways in which you need to harness all of those things that could be distractions and have it be as focused as 3 constraints to help you create the stuff you want to create. If you want a better family, if you want to create more technology integration, if you want to create a new application, if you want to have a business that grows, if you have a better team, use that tool. So here's another one. At General Mitchell Airport in Wisconsin, you've got General Mitchell Airport. It's an airport. It's in Wisconsin, right? Midwest airport. Conservative, double down on conservative, quadruple down on conservative, because it's the TSA walk-through security area. And anyone ever been to General Mitchell Airport in Wisconsin? So as you walk through, and I'm a professional traveler, right? I'm George Clooney up in the air. I know how to turn my thing. I follow the right people through the TSAs. I'm like on cloud, I'm like all that, because I travel all the time. And that's my job. But when I'm with my family, it's a complete show. It's just a mess. And we are like, this was when the girls were like 10, I've got like pink backpacks and American Girl dolls, and Joel's like trying to follow me through, and it's like, I am like a mess. I'm like, come on, I'm a professional traveler, you're killing me here. And so where I am, I got shoes hanging off my nose, and I'm trying to get through the TSA, and I get through, and as I look up, there's a sign, and it says, recombobulation area. Just like the US Air sign, and just like the exit sign, and just like gates 1 through 12 sign, it's just like that, but it says recombobulation area as I get through TSA. Do you guys not find that a little bit interesting and funny? I mean, like really? Like, dig into that a second. Recombobulation area, why did they put that sign there?
All your stuff back. Yeah.
What? For you to get recombobulated, because you've been so discombobulated. Hey, wait a minute. Don't take life so seriously. And even in the most ultra-conservative central place in the entire world, the TSA at General Mitchell in Milwaukee, they have the sense of humor to not take life too seriously. They put a recombobulation sign up. Was it the boss who said, hey, let's have a little intellectual irreverence and put a thing up to make everybody laugh and have some good times? Or was the young kid that you work with that felt like a little bit liberated that said like, screw it. And then he sent it off to the sign team and they hung it and no one actually saw it until the general manager of the airport walked by and he's like, that's crazy, I can't believe we did that. People love that. So be looking for that anonymous hero, and who is it on your team or who is it inside of yourself that wants to do a little bit more of that intellectual irreverence and have a little bit more fun and not take life too seriously and smile just a little bit more. Because you know what? It's one of them you got. So don't take it so seriously. Because that is the single most important intangible you can have if you want to grow or change yourself in the business you're working in. Period. It's this stuff which is the human stuff. It's not about integration. It's not about technology coding. It's not about any of those things. Why? Because that's what you do. That's what you do and what you're trained for. And you will do that really well. What I'm asking you to do is to reframe your total orientation to thinking about how you think about doing the things you want to do in order to do them more effectively. So right now, just think about for 1 minute your passion. The passion that when the street lights came on when you were a kid and your parents said, don't be late and you must be in by the time the street lights are on, and when the street lights came on you were like, forget about it. I'll be late because I will suffer the consequences because I love doing this so much. My thing was soccer, as David talked about, and Jeff as well, right? You were the same way. You were just kicking the ball. It didn't matter what time it was. You're getting in trouble. I don't care. Kick it against the wall. Wake up neighbors. I don't care. I'm kicking the ball, right? What's your passion, Emily? Faith, family, food, gardening, carpet laying, yogurt eating. What? Art. Jeff.
Oh, soccer.
Soccer. Tammy.
Design.
Design. Scuba diving. Bike riding. Music. We all have one. Justin. Building. David. Beautiful. What's yours, sir? Baseball. Ricky. Cars. Karen. Reading. What's yours? Softball. What is it? Design. Travel. Computers. So process your passion. And I want you to take this story and think about how you take this abstract thing called passion and apply it to the world in which you live, because it's esoteric and abstract, right? So yeah, how do I, and I was on a stage with about 3,000 people in Vegas a couple years ago. 3,000 young people. Like, how old are you? 27. Your age, 27. A lot of young people, and they were all kind of hungover because it was Sunday morning. And they all had to be there because it was a part of the certificate they got for education in their industry. So they didn't want to be there on 9 a.m. on Sunday morning after they had partied in Vegas. But they had to be because I was the keynote and they got credit in their industry and their profession. So I knew my audience, right? It was not one that wanted to be there. And I'm going on and on and on and on, and it's resonating a little bit, not resonating in other parts. And at one point I started talking about passion because I needed to enlist them to have a little bit more passion in themselves because I could see their eyes were deaf, right? And so I was like, passion, passion, passion. And I was so passionate, I was probably over-indexing on passion and probably not speaking to it in a way that you could access it. And then a kid came up to me afterwards and he said, Mr. Stefanovich, I saw you kind of getting passionate about passion, and honestly, it was kind of hard to organize how to do anything with what you said. But I think I have an idea on how you might be able to help people think about their passion. And I said, I'm all in. We met at the bar that day at 5 o'clock. And he showed up and he came in with a journal full of notes and he said, I've been thinking about it. And so you talked about soccer a lot as your passion. And he said, so I thought about it in this way. You have a passion, but then what you want to do is you want to put that passion in action. And he said, break down the pieces and parts of soccer for me that you love so much. And I said, well, number one, it's physical. I love hugging people and I love taking people down, right, when they're on a breakaway. I love all that. Number two is it's international because my dad traveled internationally and I never got to, but he would bring the liquor bottle back from the airline, for all of us old enough in the room, and he would write with a Sharpie on that liquor bottle where he was, Athens. It would be a vodka bottle. And he would tell me a story about Athens. So I saw that the world was bigger than just where I lived in Virginia. And so it was strategic because, as David knows from the last line of defense, it's all about how the flow and the narrative of the game goes. And you can feel ebbing and flowing, you can feel drafts, and you can feel kind of the mood and the mentality and the choreography and the feel and the tone, and it's very strategic. Why it's one of the most beautiful games in the world. It's highly strategic. Strategic, international, physical. It's family. My mom and dad saw me play soccer in high school and college. They traveled to travel games when I was on the travel team. I now go to watch my daughter play Lottie soccer, not very well, but loves it every minute. We make hot dogs on the sideline. To the discourse of the little preppy private school they go to, they're like, why are you barbecuing on the sideline? You can't do that at the school. I was like, hell yeah, we can. That's what my dad did, and we make barbecue hot dogs on the sideline while they're playing soccer. And it's family, and it's strategic, and it's international, and it's physical, and it's outside. My grandfather was 98 and a half when he died. His name was Orville Ketchum Shaver from Spencer, Indiana. He was a farmer's farmer boy. He would always say, when we were inside, he'd say, why are we inside when you can be outside? 80% of your life is inside. Get outside. That's why I had these windows raised so we could see the outside, because this is not life. So it's strategic, it's international, it's outside, it's family, it's physical. And so I'm telling this kid all the reasons why I love soccer. And he said to me, well, why don't you just apply those kind of attributes and use those things as the ways in which you want to lead your life and lead your professional life? What if you could be more strategic? What if you could be more international? What if you could be outside? What if you could have family more involved? And what if you could be doing deep strategy? I said, I'd have the single greatest job in the world. And I do, because I get to do all those things. And they're all inherently baked off of what I love soccer about. If you were to take your passion and break down the 5 or 6 pieces and parts on why you love it so much, baseball, why baseball? Give us a couple. Why baseball? It's strategic. It's what? Physical. What else? The history and the legacy is amazing, right? What else? Tradition. What else? One other reason you love it?
Probably the challenge of being fast.
Yeah, I mean, one of the hardest things in all of sport, if not the world, right? So, I mean, just the challenge and that whole idea that from that amount of feet, you throw a 90-mile-an-hour fastball and someone hits a round thing on a round thing, and it stays in an area. That's crazy. So by digging into that and saying, these are the reasons I'm passionate about baseball, there's an inherent connectivity to the reasons that you probably love it, and you probably love it as a person, not just as an idea. So I want you to take those actions and apply them to who you are. And you tell everybody those things, because everybody that works for me and anybody that's ever worked for me knows those 5 things about me. I want to be on the road. I want to be with my family. I want it to be strategic. I want to have good food on the sidelines with my family, metaphorically, right? It's always about meals and family being around. And I want it to be kind of physical. I want to actually like say, hi, I love you, right? I want it to be that. I don't want it to be like, hey, how you doing? No, that's not it. It's, hey, how you doing, right? Let me give you, tell me what you're thinking about right now. Donna?
Your passion and how you can apply that to
Perfect. What we just talked about, right? What do you think about? Same thing. What are you thinking about? You liar. What do you think about?
The energy you brought into this room.
Yeah. Well, it's just energy mood, right? It's not really, I'm not smart. I am a C student. What else, Patrick?
I was working for my passion.
Perfect. Perfect. So let me give you a couple here. That one doesn't feel good. Everybody think of a joke really fast. Think of a joke and something to make us all laugh. I'm going to pick two of you to stand up here and make us all laugh. You have 10 seconds to think about something to make us all laugh. Okay, so I literally saw no eyeballs. None. Tammy was the closest, but hers were like, I have no freaking idea how I'm going to make anybody laugh. But everyone else, I mean, to a letter, their eyes went down to the right or down to the left based on personality. Why? Because it sounds crazy. Does anybody have a joke, by the way? Yeah, go ahead, Tammy. So that's crazy because you were the one that was like, I have no idea, but you're like, I got a joke, stand up.
What's the best part about living in Switzerland?
What's the best part about living in Switzerland?
I don't know, flags and plus.
Ah, that's so good. I don't know, but the flag's a plus for the people out there in the video land. Brilliant, brilliant. So tell me about the risk that it took to do that, Tammy. Was it a little bit gutsy?
Sure.
Yeah. Was it a little bit, so who in the room was like, do not pick on me ever. I will put piercings in your eyeballs if you pick on me. Who are those people in the room? Yeah. Who are the people in the middle like, you know what, if he picks me, it's okay. It doesn't matter. Like, I'll go with it. It doesn't matter. Who are those people? Right? And then who are the people over here like, pick me, I can't wait. Here's the deal. Whatever risk you put on top of that. And Tammy got a little bitch with her red hair. She got a little blush. She got a little, you could see the whole emotional, psychological, physiological thing going on. But damn if you didn't get up there and take a risk. What now do we know about Tammy that we didn't know? Funny. What else? That she took a little bit of a risk, that she loves design, that she sits properly with her knees together and her like journal on her thing, and she sits very cool, very postured, and she's all put together. And so now we're looking at Tammy, we're thinking about Tammy, we know Tammy a little bit more, and on the way out someone might say to you, hey Tammy, that joke was very average, I got a better one. That joke was like that whole flag thing, don't do the flag thing, it doesn't work. I got a better joke for you, and you might have a friend at lunch now that you didn't have as a result of that, and someone's going to tell you a joke, and all of a sudden, you just kind of, with what you did, opened up the world just a little bit more for people to see and feel. But the risk you put on top of getting up in front of us and telling that risk, they were largely artificial risk and artificial barriers. There really isn't much of a barrier in terms of getting up in front of a group of people you likely will never see again, or you may not interact with again, or have to really have a connection with, but you perceive an artificial barrier and you put yourself in that role, in that place, where that risk was really not nearly as great as you imagine it to be. I want you to think about that as it relates to the idea of you and growing and changing and your team's growing and changing. When you think, that's a bit of a, that's a little much. It's not, is it really a risk? Would it really be a risk, or might it be an elegant solution, and might it just kind of open up the ways to the world a little bit differently so we see the world a little bit differently and make more trial and errors and make more mistakes to get more stuff done? Do not allow yourself to put the perceived and artificial barriers on top of the stuff that really isn't there. There are risks and there are real risks, but there's much more around this idea of perceived and artificial risk than we imagine there to be. Do not allow them to get in the way of this thing called growth and change. So we have 5 minutes, we have 2 hours left, we have about 4 hours, we have until 5, this is awesome. Dave, I love the fact that you gave me all day. We are going to have some fun. I got a bus outside, we're going on a trip. Anybody want to go? You want to go? Where would you want? We should go see something. That's what I'm metaphorically hoping us to do right now. I'm in Denmark, at Molsgren. Molsgren is this bed and breakfast in this small little island in Denmark. And I'm working for this university called the Chaos Pilots. I'm on their board. It's a social impact and social innovation university. 90 students who do 3 things. The first year they think about what they want to do to change the world. The second year they design for it. And the third year they do for it. That's the curriculum. 90 kids changing the world right now. That's the design. 3 things. I'm going to come back to 3 things in a minute. I'm sitting there waiting on all my hungover Danish friends who party much too much than right before. This more sober American sitting there for 2 hours, then 3 hours, waiting on them to come down to the lobby for us to do our day's worth of work. I'm sitting there, as I look over, there's a Steinway piano, and then there's a chafing dish with a Veuve Clicquot, I'll never forget it, the orange labeled champagne, because I wrote it all down and took a picture of it. And it's sitting there, and I'm now 2 hours in, then 3 hours in, and as we're sitting there on that Sunday morning waiting, I'm sitting there waiting on him, condensation creates itself on the chafing bowl, and it starts dripping on not a piano, but a Steinway piano. My confusion tolerance, which is really high, got a little low. And I was like, it's dripping on the Steinway piano. I know that's an expensive piano. I've heard about it. The brand is important, brand. And I went up to the maitre d', I was like, what's going on? There's like there's chafing dish, and then it's dripping, and like I'm worried, and my friends are all over him, and they're not here, and what's going on? He said, oh, you silly American. You silly American. You only celebrate when you think you have to celebrate, and there's times when celebration is so perfectly appointed. But we in Denmark have celebration material on hand all the time, 24/7, 365. At any point, someone may want to celebrate. And we want to celebrate the big, the small, the indifferent, because that's what it's all about. Life is celebration. Where is it? In these intangibles that you're not including celebration of yourself, of the people you're working with, and otherwise. And it sounds like, yeah, that guy talks about celebration and drinking some champagne and whatever. Yeah, whatever. It's the biggest companies in the world. They're doing this more because they are the ones that are differentiating. And the companies that you're hearing about that are kicking ass and taking names and changing the world are the ones who do these things, the intangibles. Because all the tangibles are the things that are kind of what they do. It's not who they are. It's who they are is the differentiation. It's truly the differentiation. It is the source of inspiration, which creates new thoughts, which creates new ideas, which creates new innovations that go to the world and change the world. It's that simple. Let me give you this whole idea of three is a couple quick, for those of you who have been like, he's told a lot of stories, let me give you a little bit of a mechanism. There's this power of three, and Shakespeare kind of loved the idea of talking to the noble, talking to the middle, and talking to the lower. And he would write and create his art in the form of appealing to all those different classes, because he realized that that was the way the world was kind of codified. And so this power of three has always been something I've loved, largely because Shakespeare kind of wrote the book on it, and largely because I was a C student through high school and college all the way, and I probably couldn't do more than three things. It was very simple for me, like, what three things, what three things, what three things, and it's one of those CEO, what three things will you do, what three things are we going to do, and what three things make the future, and what three things are you passionate about, and what three things are your leaders thinking about, and it's really simple. And so Infotech is a conference that is in India, and Bill Gates was asked to speak there in 1992 when we were playing soccer, and when this technology bubble was just not thing, was a really hot, really happening, right? 1992, it's starting to kind of ferment a lot, and we're getting a lot more understanding of what this potential technology in the world could be. Bill Gates was asked by the Minister of Culture to come to Chennai and get on a stage and talk to what was literally and figuratively 1 billion Indians. And I know that because I worked for a company called Free Play Radio, which was a wind-up solar-powered radio, and they gave away hundreds of thousands of these radios on that event. I found out some 15 years later. They gave these things away to tribes, and people in India had no electricity, would have never heard this message. Bill Gates gets on the stage, the Minister of Culture says, what should we do around the idea of opportunity to take advantage of this thing called technology in the world today? And Bill Gates got up there and he said, hello fellow Indians, not fellow Indians, but Indians out there in the world, I think you ought to do three things. Three things. You ought to buy land near the metropolitan airports, Mumbai, Chennai, and otherwise in India. Buy land by those airports. Number two is build really great buildings with all the technologies inside of them. And number three is travel the world and find the finest and those inside of your homeland and put those in those buildings, and so go make things. Buy land, build buildings on them, and fill them with smart people. That's what you ought to do. The Minister of Culture, as he got off the stage, said, thank you, Mr. Gates, we'll do just that. I go to India regularly for work. India, anyone, Ben? If you go to these places, you will find these beautiful buildings by these industrial parks, by the airports, because they filled them with buildings, and just did what Bill Gates did. And it was three things. Three things. Just three things. The High Line in New York City, and everyone been to the High Line. The High Line is the 28-foot elevated park that goes 3.5 miles now. It used to be a railroad kind of train thing over above the elevated street, 28 feet, that brought the meat into the meatpacking district. Two civil kind of community people went to a meeting where it was about tearing it down. They said, we're not going to allow it. Anderson Cooper's mom, who's that? Gloria Vanderbilt was in the audience. She said, it's not getting torn down. I'm in for their first $1 million. Another celebrity from Manhattan raised their hand. They raised $6 million that night. They went on to raise hundreds of millions of dollars to make this amazingly perfect park at 28 feet above the streets in New York City. It's Central Park, 28 feet up, it's narrow, it's about as wide as this, in areas as wide as this room, a little bit wider in areas, and it's just kind of perfect. You have to go. Like, get on a plane and go. You're nodding your head. It's perfect, right? It's perfect. I was walking through it with a GE executive about 6 months ago, and I said, we've got, walking with the curator of the Highline, with this executive, and we were doing nothing more than looking at more. Walking around, looking at stuff, watching ethnographic, anthropologic things in the world, and seeing how people looked at me, and looked at how they looked at my boots, and whether they made eye contact, and whether I put my hand on their knee, how they reacted to it. And we were doing that, and he's the senior vice president of GE number 4 at GE. And he did this for 3 days with me. That's looking at more stuff. 3 days, we got out in the world and saw the world, and applied it all back to what he was thinking about as a leader. But when I asked the curator, I said, how in fact did you achieve such perfection? How did you get such goodness and such amazingness out of this park? How'd you do it? And she said, well, very simple. We have 3 curatorial lenses we look through on every decision we make around programming, designing, implementing the Highline. They are slow, wild, and quiet. I was like, tell me more. Well, see the quiet. When we think about quiet, we have signs that say, don't stand on this, and don't sit here, and don't do that. But instead of it being a white sign and a black print on it, we have a gray sign with a gray monochromatic, darker gray on top of it. So it's a quiet sign. It's not a loud sign. And when we think about slow, down by the Standard Hotel down by 14th Street, where you come up on it, 28 feet, you come up to this elevated park. Instead of having a staircase that was escalated at that degree, they have it escalated at that degree. So it's a very slow entrance into it, as opposed to a fast entrance from the city. So you get this slow entrance. And then wild is, see the shrubbery and see all the beautiful bushes we have? It's kind of like Uncle Mitch. It's a little imperfect. And it's a little bit wild. And it's not so perfect. It's not refined. It's not these beautiful, perfectly tapered bushes and flowers. It's a little bit wild, which allows you to kind of loosen up a little bit. It's not so perfect. Slow, wild, and quiet. When you think about creating anything, what are your 3 creative curatorial lenses that keep you in track, on brand, and in the pace and the context of what you're creating? They are your honest engines. They keep you alive. Last thought. Let's see, this one feels good. So it's Joel Klein is an author for Time Magazine. Anyone know Joel Klein? Writer of everything. He's amazing, right? He captures words and ideas perfectly. Writes on everything in the world. And he loved George Clooney. I've mentioned George before. And George is like, every guy in here thinks he's awesome, and every want to have a beer with him, and every girl in here is like, I would go on a date with him. He's like that guy, right? And he seems like that guy. I don't know why, but he just does to me. And so Joel Klein loved him. He put out to the world the energy, the fact that he would love to do an article on George Clooney. George Clooney doesn't do a lot of these kind of articles, but George Clooney loves Joel Klein's writing, so your craft and your art sometimes find its way in the world, and people will find you as a result of that. He called Joel Klein in his humble Hollywood Hills home and said, hey, randomly, picks up the phone. Joel Klein picks up the phone. Hey, it's George Clooney. Hey, Joel, I love your writing. I heard you want to do an article on me. What if I came over on Saturday night and you interviewed me? That'd be great. I can't wait. Hang up the phone. Joel Klein hangs the phone like, holy shit, George Clooney's coming to my house on Saturday night. Here's the verbatim of what it read in Time Magazine, the article. I read, this is a new card, the original card I wrote this on. By the way, I have no computer. I've never had a computer. I've never opened Microsoft. I've never turned on a computer. I don't know how to navigate a Word document in that. I don't know what cloud means. I don't know any of that. Because that's what other people know. I don't need to know that. I need to know how to see out here, right? So all my thoughts are on these cards, 30,000 of them in shoe bags in my office at home. 30,000 of thoughts and ideas and peoples and contexts from around the world. That's all I got. Very, very simple, right? It's not overcomplicated. It's like simple. What do you use and what's best? So this card says, because this is the verbatim from the article, it's 6:45 on a Saturday night when the doorbell rings a little late. Clooney hit traffic, his assistant called to say, on his way back from Vegas from visiting his girlfriend. He's wearing faded jeans, black laced-up boots, zipped-up sweater, and he looks a lot less like a movie star than a normal, unbotoxed, 46-year-old unmarried guy coming over for dinner. But he also looks like he's excited to be there because wherever he is, George Clooney's also there. And I wrote down, swagger, habits, bring it to the room in your way. When George walks in the room, he's probably not like, ta-da-da, He just walks in like, hi, I'm George and we're equals and let's have a great dinner and a good conversation and what kind of wine do you like and let's listen to some good music and talk about life and maybe some vulnerable stuff. And it's just him being him, but in a way that because he's there, it's just better. And what I propose to you is an idea, the most magical idea that I want to impose onto you guys as people who do amazing things and have amazing impact and imprints on the world, is just come in with the most natural version of yourself, with no airs, no packaging, no nothing, all the vulnerabilities. And when you walk in, that room, that context, that environment, that conversation, that meeting, that moment, that event is just better. That is the single most important intangible you can bring to anything you're working on ever. Ever. Not in work, not in life, but everything all the time to the day you go to the grave. So all I wanted to do was provide you a bunch of thoughts, not about technology, not about business, not about any of that stuff, because that's what you do and you're really good at it. I wanted to give you new lenses to think about how to think about who you are, what you do, and why you're doing it. Because that's the intangible stuff. And I want you to take these lenses and apply them to all the tactical and practical and very amazingly important stuff you're going to be working on for the rest of the day, and use this as a nice filter and a nice lens to kind of look through and add those things together. Intuition of Andy, intelligence of the next couple 4 or 5 hours. And put them together and good stuff comes. So thank you for allowing me to just share with you a bunch of stuff. Let me be passionate, let me be awkward and imperfect, because that's kind of the best version of me. So thank you for that, and go do good stuff. And it's a pleasure. Cheers. Thank you.